That's a good idea.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are you all doing?
Good.
Nice that the fog finally burned off. It was thick this morning, like pea soup.
This time of the year.
Yep.
We're talking about recipes, so could you hold on?
Get each other's numbers.
There you go.
After class. Huh?
Yeah, right. So welcome to session 4 of Revelation. So last couple of times we've looked at the 7 churches that Revelation is written to, and saw this incredible vision that John had of God on the throne and the slain and yet living Lamb. And the Lamb started opening the scroll with 7 seals on it. So it's really helpful for us to keep in mind who the original audience was, these 7 churches in what is now the area of Turkey, that John was told to send this letter to. And Christ had a specific message for each of the churches, and by hearing the situations that they were in, some of them under persecution, some of them being affluent and kind of complacent, others being lured away by false teaching and so forth, it's helpful for us to then be able to hear it through their ears and see it in our own situations today. So we're using this really helpful poster from the Bible Project that walks through the whole book of Revelation in 2 videos that you can watch online. And the message that was given to the 7 churches was basically one of 2 things. They were faced with this choice that they would either compromise their faith and bow down to the emperor and go along with all of the pagan religious practices of the world around them, or they would be faithful to Christ and his message and his kingdom, even if it meant suffering and death, because Christ promised that those who conquer will be rewarded. So we want to talk a little bit about, well, what does he mean by conquering? So we're going to watch a little bit of that video from the first video from the Bible Project on this particular section. I don't know if I can get it to start.
The arrow is way down. Yeah, there, it's bold now. Maybe you just click.
Oh, okay. Maybe I have it up here.
Okay.
This opening section, it sets up the main plot tension that will drive the storyline in this book. Will Jesus' people endure? Will they inherit the new world that God has in store? And why is faithfulness to Jesus described as conquering? The rest of the book is John's answer. After this, John has a vision of God's heavenly throne room, and he describes it with imagery drawn from many Old Testament prophets. Surrounding God are creatures and elders that represent all creation and human nations, and they're giving honor and allegiance to the one true Creator God who is holy, holy, holy. In God's hand is a scroll that's closed up with 7 wax seals. It symbolizes the message of the Old Testament prophets and the sealed scroll of Daniel's visions. These are all about how God's kingdom will come here fully on earth as in heaven. But it turns out no one is able to open the scroll until John hears of someone who can. It's the Lion from the tribe of Judah and the root of David. He can open it. These are classic Old Testament descriptions of the Messianic king who would bring God's kingdom through military conquest. Now, that's what John hears. But then what he turns and sees is not an aggressive lion king, but a sacrificed bloody lamb, who's alive, standing there and ready to open the scroll. Now, this symbol of Jesus as the slain lamb, this is crucially important for understanding the book. John's saying that the Old Testament promise of God's future victorious kingdom was inaugurated through the crucified Messiah. Jesus overcame his enemies by dying for them as the true Passover lamb so that they could be redeemed. Because of the resurrection, Jesus' death on the cross was not a defeat, it was his enthronement. It was the way he conquered evil. And so this vision concludes with the Lamb alongside the one sitting on the throne, and together they are worshipped as the one true Creator and Redeemer, and the slain Lamb begins to open the scroll. It's a symbol of his divine authority to guide history to its conclusion. Which brings us to the next section of the book, the 3 cycles of 7. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. And each cycle depicts God's kingdom and justice coming here on earth as in heaven. Now, some people think that the 3 sets of 7 divine judgments represent a literal, linear sequence of events that either happened in the past, or could be happening now, or are yet to happen in the future when Jesus returns. But notice how John has woven all the 7s together. So the final 7 bowls come out of the 7th trumpet and the 7th seal. And the 7 trumpets emerge from the 7th seal. They're like nesting dolls. Each 7th contains the next 7. Also notice how each of the series of 7 culminates in the final judgment, and they have matching conclusions. So it's more likely that John is using each set of 7 to depict the same period of time between Jesus' resurrection and future return from 3 different perspectives. So the slain lamb begins to open the scroll's first 4 seals. And John sees 4 horsemen. It's an image from the book of Zechariah chapter 1. And they symbolize times of war, conquest, famine, and death. In other words, a tragically average day in human history. Then the 5th seal depicts the murdered Christian martyrs before God's heavenly throne. And the cry of their innocent blood rises up before God like smoke from the altar of incense. And they're told to rest, because more Christians are yet to die. We're not told why, but we are told that it won't last forever. The 6th seal is God's ultimate response to their cry. He brings the great day of the Lord that was described in Isaiah and Joel, and the people of the earth cry out, "Who is able to stand?" And then all of a sudden, John pauses the action with an intermission to answer that question.
Yes. So the Lamb is opening this scroll, and I love how they describe that. There's all these cycles of 7s in Revelation. The 7 seals that he opens, and the 7 bowls of God's wrath, and the 7 trumpets, and they're not just right in a row. It's like they're woven together. They're like nesting dolls that contain the next one, and so forth. So it's anytime that we try and put this on a timeline, it's like the rug gets pulled right out from underneath us. So he said it's more likely that John is looking at the time between Jesus' resurrection and his return from several different perspectives.
Opening.
All right. So, I invite you to open your Bibles to chapter 6 of the first 4, where we look at the first 4 seals that the Lamb opens on this scroll. And they unleash the 4 horsemen. You've probably heard this idea of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That's where this comes from. This is a little presentation that I actually made for my Revelation class back in seminary, and I've updated it with some more new material. You remember a few weeks ago when we were talking about the 7 churches of Revelation? I showed you a woodcut by Albrecht Dürer, a guy who lived around the same time as Martin Luther, and it was of Christ standing among the 7 lampstands. Well, Albrecht Dürer was an artist back during the Reformation era. And this book of Revelation, he made several different woodcuts to illustrate it. Because Revelation contains all these bewildering visual images. And over the centuries, there's been all sorts of different artists that have tried to illustrate John's description of divine reality. A lot of times it kind of stretches the limit of human speech. Like, how do you even describe what John's seeing? So Albrecht Dürer lived 1471 to 1528, and he specialized in woodcuts, where he would carve into a piece of wood and then use that to print these amazing images. And a lot of his works are found in several editions of Bibles from that time. And one of these was called the Apocalypse of 1498. It was often copied by a bunch of other artists, and perhaps the most famous of the images in that edition is Dürer's depiction of the four horsemen of Revelation 6. I've made copies of this in, let's see, I'm gonna click through these. There. I've made a copy of that on the back of the handout for today. So you have a copy of that. If you didn't grab it on your way in, they're up there.
So he carved that?
Yes.
Oh.
This is carved. You know, probably a pretty good sized thing originally, and then they would, you know, put ink over it, and that's the image that would then show.
Wow.
So it's this amazing thing. So these four horsemen are here in Revelation 6, 1 through 8. What do you see in this picture?
A lot
A
of
lot.
horses.
Yeah. There's all, so we're gonna kind of focus in and see all the different things that are in
Yes.
this picture.
Chaos.
Rambling.
So there's four horsemen, you know, from right to left, and the first one is way over on the right.
That's a bold.
Somebody, let's see, yeah. So they're kind of a formidable looking crew. So the bowman is the first one that John describes. It's the one that's farthest away in John's drawing, way over here. Or I guess he can't get there. Here we go. Yeah, this guy way over here. Get back to this. Here he is up close. So, will somebody read the first two verses of that, of Revelation 6, verses 1 and 2?
As I watched, the Lamb broke the first of the seven seals on the scroll. Then I heard one of the four living beings say with a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked up and saw a white horse standing there. Its rider carried a bow, and a crown was placed on his head. He rode out to win many battles and gain the victory.
Yes, came out, or it can also be translated, he came out conquering and to conquer. So why would Dürer picture this horseman as the furthest away? Now what?
He comes later, maybe.
It already occurred.
That's a good question.
Or
You know,
comes later.
maybe when?
Well, the Mongols used those bows and arrows.
Yeah. So I think for us to understand it, again, all this imagery, how would it have spoken to the people of the early, you know, like 90s of that time? What would a mounted bowman have meant to them, to those churches to which Revelation is written? What would it have signified to them? Because if we better understand how those images communicated to the people then, we can make better sense of what meaning they convey to us today. So let's look first at an image that we're familiar with.
My Bible says a bow only,
Yeah, a bow.
and he brought peace for 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm. So bow. So the 3.5 years. That's something significant that gets repeated a number of different times
But he
throughout
brought peace
Revelation.
For 3.5 years.
Yeah. So we'll come to that in a little while, but there in Revelation 6 it says this bowman came out conquering and to conquer. So an image that is kind of similar for us a few years ago would be this one. What's that the symbol of?
Russia.
Russia, or specifically,
Soviet
the Soviet Union. Yeah. What emotions would this symbol have called up in people in this country 40, 50 years ago?
Slavery,
Fear.
slavery with the Russian.
Yep.
You don't behave, you're gonna pound rocks in the jail.
Right.
Yeah. And how about for us here? How would it have, what emotions would made us feel?
Anger,
Anger,
fear.
You might
Yeah,
be
fear.
enslaved under them.
worry.
Pity for those who are under that.
Oh yeah, and just that people that are under that regime were in terrible conditions. Maybe a sense of rivalry. That was the other superpower, and we had to watch out for them. Maybe a feeling of insecurity. We felt threatened by this, by the Soviet Union. It was this is the symbol of a communist nation just outside our boundaries. This hostile force that threatened us from afar. So the hammer and sickle, it made us feel resentment, fear, because it symbolized insecurity on our borders, a threat that loomed on the horizon. In the same way, for the churches, the 7 churches in Revelation, the mounted bowmen represented a threat on their borders. The mounted bowman was a symbol, the national symbol of Parthia, a country on the extreme eastern edge of the Roman Empire. It was where the Roman armies had lost a major battle. They were used to just steamrolling over everybody in their path as they extended their empire. But when they got to Parthia, they were repulsed by these fearsome mounted bowmen. And that country lay on the edges of the empire like this ominous cloud on the horizon. So, and each of the horsemen in this vision have a different color. The horse has a different color. So this one is a white horse, and that color is often used to represent the color of victory. So this horseman, he's the furthest away in Dürer's painting, and maybe that's because that threat is the one that's often the furthest removed from us. The threat of foreign invasion is often, feels distant, and one that sometimes we don't think about. It's just kind of out there, but it's still there, looming on the horizon. The next horseman from Revelation brings us a step closer in Dürer's woodcut. Will somebody read verses 3 and 4?
When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come," and out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword.
So here, the threat comes a little bit closer. This horseman, he's seated on a red horse, the color of blood, and he takes peace from the earth so that people slaughter each other. Now the threat comes not from outside the country, but from inside. The Romans talked a lot about the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. And they felt that everywhere that they went, they brought peace to the earth. But it was a blood-stained peace. If you didn't toe the line, you were killed, you were crucified, you were shut out. But in 68 AD, shortly before Revelation was written, there were 3 Roman emperors in 1 year. You know why that was?
Assassination.
Yes, poison, assassination, a military coup. Those happened all the time. And so there was this lurking question, is this peace really stable? How safe are we in our own streets?
Sounds like today.
Yeah. Remember this a few years ago? The Las Vegas festival shooting? Lone gunman had holed up on, way up on the 32nd floor of this hotel and was shooting with, multiple automatic weapons at a festival, And this is not an isolated event. We keep having all of these mass shootings. And so violence happens even right here in our midst where we think that we're safe.
Look at all the riots that we had the
Yeah.
last couple of years.
Yeah.
Everything got burnt and
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Yep. Not all of our enemies are on the outside. Terror can strike from within as well. So this horseman hits a little bit closer to home. As it says, he made people slaughter one another. What do you notice about the third horseman in Durer's woodcut?
Carrying scale,
The what?
the scale.
Yeah, he's carrying scales. Yep. What else?
His feet look like a reptile.
Oh, his feet look reptilian? Okay. Or, maybe, I don't know if those are like boots or, yeah.
Can you bring that one up closer?
Yeah. There's the scale. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
see it.
it's flung out behind him. He's got these scales.
Yeah.
Yep. And also, if you notice in the painting, he is the biggest. He takes up like a third of the whole woodcut. All of this. Yeah, it jumps right out at you. He's like the most threatening, the most frightening. So, what does this horseman represent? Will somebody read verses 5? Oh yeah, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna think maybe it was about justice and revenge.
Oh, okay. Well, let's find out. Somebody read verses 5 and 6.
When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I saw, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a balance in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm oil and wine."
So, what do the scales on this horseman's hand signify? They don't represent the scales of justice.
King.
Yeah, the scales of the marketplace. Because you would weigh things out the way that you. A lot of times, it was a denarius was a coin that was worth a day's wages, and you had to weigh them to make sure they were of the right weight and hadn't been shaved off or something like that. So this is the scales of the marketplace. This horseman deals with a threat that hits home very hard. Our pocketbooks.
Like taxes.
This
So-
guy today too was
so-
section.
Yeah.
All of those.
So what he's crying out is a quart of wheat for a day's pay. How many people can you feed with a quart of wheat that hasn't been even turned into flour? Not very many. If you have to spend your entire wage just to buy bread, you're not going to have much left over for luxuries like olive oil and wine. So maybe Durer makes this horseman larger than life because this threat is the one that always seems to hang over our heads. How secure is your job? How stable is the economy? Is there disaster ahead? Those questions can, send shivers down our backs. So, let's read verses 7 and 8, the fourth horseman. Who wants to read that one?
When the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the fourth living beings say, Come. I looked up and saw a horse, whose color was pale green. Its rider was named Death, and his companion was the Grave. These two were given authority over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with the sword, and famine, and disease, and wild animals.
So it's a pale green horse. The previous one was a black horse. And, you know, black is like the color of affliction.
You can see the horse's ribs too.
Yeah,
Sickly.
yeah, pale green horse. That was the color of dead and decaying flesh.
Underfed.
Yeah. So where is this horseman in the way down in the corner, way down over here?
Looks like he got a spear or
But
something.
where
in his
is he
hand.
in relation to the people at the bottom?
Right on top of them.
He's right on top of them. And you can see Hades down here in the corner, kind of like this big monster, death, swallowing up somebody right there. So you almost don't even notice this horseman and Hades at first in the woodcut, but they are the ones that are right in our midst.
Looks like he's carrying a fork or a
Yeah. Here he is, a little bit closer.
Yeah, he looks like skeletal.
He hasn't been
Uh-huh.
in a while.
Yeah, he's got. Yeah,
wow.
yep. Hades is swallowing up someone with a crown on his head. Yeah.
I find it interesting that there's an angel at the top.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a minute. So, death is swallowing up this guy with a crown. Even the rich and the powerful are ultimately swallowed up by death. We like to overlook death today, too. We have a culture that desperately tries to deny death. We look for ways to cheat death, to extend our lives. But eventually it catches up to us. In fact, it's right in our lap. Remember that old saying, ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Here's a famous tombstone at Boot Hill out west. Here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a 44. No less, no more. It's a little sarcastic, but
Wow.
that's often what we do with death. You know, we try to shrug it off, kind of laugh at it, anything to make it seem to go away. But it's always there, just a step behind. We know all too well that death can happen suddenly. A heart attack, an auto accident, death is right in our laps. So this horseman calls to mind our own vulnerability. These horsemen gallop at us with terrible speed. They push at our sense of safety. Where are the limits of our security? Who is safe from these threats? No one, it seems. It looks like they're going to trample everybody in their path. Our borders are not secure. Our communities are not safe. Our finances can be unstable. Death lurks in the shadows. How can anyone stand? But look again at the picture. What else do you see?
You're not afraid.
Yeah. Up above is an angel. Here, let me get to him. It's right there. Way up here, there's an angel flying up above. An angel is giving commands to the horsemen. They are not simply free agents, they are called and sent by God's command. They're not just running rampant around the earth. Their powers are limited. The text says that death and Hades are only given authority over 1/4 of the earth. God allows their presence, but he limits what they're able to do. These horsemen and the threats that they represent can seem terrifying to us. But the angel above reminds us that God is ultimately in control. Death and Hades do not have the last word. God will finally triumph over them through the resurrection and the coming of his kingdom. Oh yeah, and,
Did these
there's the picture of
horsemen
the-
all ride together? Or did one come, as the scrolls were open?
yeah.
Was it in succession?
In
or-
succession, yep. So he just pictured them all
That-
together.
But that's how,
Yeah.
okay, but they did all happen,
Mm-hmm.
boom, 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 like one after the other?
Yep. So, yeah, we're given this incredible visual picture of all of these threats that were on the horizon and right in their midst back then, and they're the same ones that we deal with today too.
In my study Bible, it says some of the scrolls were up to 30 feet long.
Oh yeah. Yep, that was the way that they wrote all the scriptures. Were on scrolls made out of like animal skin, sewn together and so forth. Yep. So those are the first 4 seals, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So it's to be continued. It's significant that they're called, come or go, because God allows them, but limits them. So let's go on to the 5th and 6th seals. I'm going to read. Let's go to here. Oh, yeah. So one of the things that you'll notice about Revelation is what they pointed out about all the different sevens, the 7 seals, and then the 7 bowls of God's wrath, and the 7 trumpets. They're all kind of woven together. They're not just this, sequence of events. Like one comes out, the second 7 comes out of the 7th seal. The 7 trumpets come out of the 7th bowl. So it's more. You can't really just string it together in this timeline to predict what's going to happen at the end of the world. It's more like there are these cycles of, everything gets worse and worse and worse and worse. You got all these horsemen happening, and then all of a sudden you find yourself back in the throne room of God. And then all these 7 bowls are dumped out, and all this wrath and plagues and all disasters and stuff happen, and then suddenly you're back in the throne room of God. And then, and so it's going around and around, but it's all heading somewhere toward new creation.
Makes me think of the sun will come out tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's like ups and downs
Exactly.
through your whole life.
exactly.
Is that just the whole point of Revelation? Just that all these things happen, but God is ever present?
Yep, exactly. That no matter what we see around us, no matter what threats we go through, no matter the suffering, the pain, the temptations, the difficulties, God is in control, and this is all moving. History is heading somewhere to resurrection, new life, new creation. Here's verses 9 through 17. When the Lamb opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Oh, before I go on, I wanted to have another slide here. So as I read these, I want you to think about who is it describing, where are they, and what condition are they in, and what happens. So both in Seal 5 and in Seal 6. So the 5th seal. I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Then they were each given a white robe, and told to rest a little longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, the full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich, and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?" So in the fifth seal, who is it describing? The martyrs. Those who have been killed for their testimony to Christ. Yep. And where are they?
The altar?
Under the altar. Yep. So in the throne room of God. And what condition are they in?
They haven't risen yet.
They're dead, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. They're dead, and so they are at rest. Yeah. They're
Is it where the Catholic Church got purgatory?
nope. That's not anywhere in Scripture.
I have a cousin that's a nun, and she said one day, my aunt was over there, and my mother and my aunt ran the church, and she said, "Oh, the Pope threw that out years ago." My aunt said, "He did not." I said, "Well,
Yeah. No, they still talk about it and still use it as kind of this, yeah. So what happens? So the martyrs are under the altar in the throne room of God. They're at rest, and what happens to them?
We're given a robe.
Yeah, they're given white robes. And what else are they told to do?
Rest.
To continue resting.
Hang in
for a
there.
while. Yeah, they're given this promise. You know, it's not always going to be like this. So then seal 6, when he opens the 6th seal, then who do we see?
I see my wife.
Yeah,
Right sitting
Not a
there.
pretty
yeah, she's right there.
Kings and generals.
Kings, generals, all these mighty people, and who else?
Slaves and free.
Slave and free,
Well,
everyone.
that's it.
All, like everybody else on earth. And where are they?
They're alive.
Yeah, they're on earth.
They're hiding.
mountains
There.
and rocks.
Mhm.
Yes. So
They're
what?
fearful.
Yeah, they're fearful. They're disturbed. They're afraid because all this, earthquake and everything. And what happens?
Probably like us on Judgment Day.
Okay. How so?
Well, we're fearful when
Uh-huh.
we see this coming. We're all, we can't hide.
Yeah. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to hide in.
In the latter part of verse 14, it mentions that the mountains and the islands are all going to be moved from their places.
Right. Yeah. Every mountain and island was removed from its place.
Big earthquake.
And yet that's in verse 14, and yet in verse 15, the very next verse, they all hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains.
They can't hide
What?
from God.
What?
They can't hide from
It's,
God.
you can't kind of just put this into a timeline. It's like they're gone and then they're back. Wait.
They're moved, but there's still places
Well-
where they can go to.
Yeah.
But believers weren't supposed to be scared.
Yep. So there's these pictures in these 2 seals of 2 different groups of people. The martyrs, those who have died for their faith and are with God, and those who are on earth and who are in all sorts of turmoil. People at that time, when in the days of those 7 churches, around turn of the 1st century, they had haunting memories of the martyrs. They had seen friends, family members, who had been taken away and put in prison, tortured, killed for their faith. And so they were wondering, is it worth it? Is it worth it to suffer brutally for the faith? Why be faithful if it leads to horrible suffering and death? So what effect might this vision have on those people who had those questions?
You'd be afraid to follow.
Doubting, could be a
Well,
doubting.
yeah, why do you say comfort?
Because their family or friends that happened to are at rest with white
Yes.
robes and a
The
presence of
martyrs
God.
are at rest. They've been given white robes. They're in God's presence.
And they've been saved from the turmoil.
Yeah. Yeah. They're at rest, at peace.
Do they know that though, or are they?
So that's what this vision is telling
Telling
them.
them to get this vision.
The
Yeah.
faithful, those who are faithful unto death, they weren't the losers. They have conquered through their suffering, through their faithfulness. So, what effect might that vision have on the people who are hearing it and seeing it?
Hang on and you'll have peace and eternity with God.
Yes, hang on. There's hope. The suffering that we're going through doesn't have the last word.
He's the best boss.
You know,
That's
even though
right.
you're
He's the
believers,
best boss. And even the rich and powerful will get what's coming to them.
even though you're believers, there's still gotta be fear.
Yeah.
There's still gotta be fear among the believers.
Yeah. So the martyrs were afflicted, tortured losers on earth, but they have rest and vindication in their home in heaven. And the others who, lived with security, because they were allied themselves with the powers that be, they will face judgment and wrath from God. So, this vision of the fifth and sixth seals comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable. And so the very last thing they say is, the great day of the wrath of God and the Lamb has come, and who can stand? What's the implied answer?
No one.
No one can stand. But there are some who are worthy to stand before God and the Lamb. Not by their social position or by what they've done, but by God's grace. We're going to hear about them next week. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Martyrs. So the great day, yeah. So next week, we are going to be looking at chapters 7 through 11, which will talk about the 144,000 and the great multitude, the seventh seal, and the 7 trumpets. So read all the way up through chapter 11 and bring your questions. Yes?
The comment I have in the bottom of my Bible for those last couple of verses is, no one who has rejected God can survive the day of his wrath, but those who belong to Christ will receive a reward rather than punishment. When you belong to Christ, you are safe, and the events of those final days will not harm you.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. The ones who are able to stand are the ones who have been marked by Christ, who have been called according to his purpose. And that's us. We're called to follow Christ, to follow the Lamb, even through suffering, even through difficulty, even through death, because none of those things have the last word in our lives. I'd like to close, as we've talked about, us Lutherans don't often read Revelation in worship, but we sing it all the time. So here is one of the songs from our hymnal that echo a lot of this vision from Revelation. All hail the power of Jesus' name.
Hey, you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
We'll sing 3 verses of it. Verses
Okay.
1, 2, and 7.
I better give an intro.
Bring forth the royal diadem. What echoes did you hear of Revelation in that song?
Oh, the altar,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
martyr.
Yes, the martyrs. Crown him, you martyrs, who from his altar call. Yep. Who is the stem of Jesse's rod?
Jesus.
Jesus. Yep. Jesse was David's father, so part of David's line that Jesus was. And you know what else in that first verse? Yeah. Angels falling on their faces before the Lord, casting their crowns before him. That's all the elders do that. And what about this last verse? Yeah, we're gonna join the sacred throng, the holy ones, the ones who've gone before us in faith, and fall at his feet and sing that everlasting song, that he is the Lord of all. All right. So next week, the seventh seal and the seven trumpets, read up through 11, and if you want to go back and look at that first video, the whole thing on Revelation, or on which you can find at that website or on YouTube. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know.